Hello and happy summer! I thought I'd do a really quick video on making a water mesh sling for summertime and for showering during the year because a customer had sent me some fabric. I don't keep these in stock anymore, but since I have it here, I thought I might do a video. So the most important thing on this is going to be the fabric that you choose. This is athletic mesh. It's not stretchy at all along the length. It's very slightly stretchy across the width. You want to make sure that when you look at fabrics, you're looking for something that has little to no stretch along the length. If you have a stretchy fabric going in this direction, it's virtually impossible to use. You'll never be able to get it tight enough, and if you do get it tight enough, it's going to be uncomfortable. So if you're at the fabric store, do some feeling, stretch this way, stretch this way. Avoid fabrics with a lot of lycra in them and also knits for the most part. So that's going to really rule out most dance and swimwear fabrics. You will be tempted by those because they come in gorgeous colors and often some nice patterns too, but they're just not going to make a very good sling. If you're using multi-pass carriers like a wrap, it's a little bit, you could use it, but really only for a very small baby. So this athletic mesh is what we tend to recommend the most. It's either 100% polyester or 100% nylon. Ordinarily, we don't recommend polyester for a sling. This is the exception because it's got all these little holes in it. It does not tear. It's very strong, and it dries very quickly in the water. So it makes for a good water sling. So I've actually already hemmed the edges on this using a rolled hem on my serger. If you don't have a serger, that's fine. You don't actually need to hem the edges. I just prefer it for slings that I'm sending to people because I think it looks a little nicer to have this finished edge. However, it does roll. So if you just cut it kind of using these holes as a guide, you'll get this sort of rolled edge when you wear it anyway, and it really doesn't show. So you don't even have to hem it. If you do hem, I have trouble hemming this stuff, even using my hemming foot. It's difficult for the machine to make a nice seam on this because it kind of wants to shift around a lot. It's kind of slippery. So honestly, if you're just making this for yourself, I would leave the edges unhemmed. If you happen to have a serger that would do a rolled edge, then that's nice too. You really can do any shoulder style that you want with mesh. There's no rule that says it has to be pleated, it has to be gathered. It's just like another sling. Find what's comfortable for you and go with that. Because I'm making this for a customer, I'm going to pleat it. So I will show you that. Because we're going to be using small rings, you don't want to sew super far away on a pleated shoulder. So when I do these pleats, I'm going to start with about 2 inches here, maybe 1.5. I honestly don't measure pleats anymore. I just, I've done so many. This is about 1.5 inches though. So I need to move the camera a little bit. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to fold up to that about 1.5 inches. And really this is not, you don't have to get out the ruler and make sure that you're doing this exactly the same. Pin once along the cut edge, and then you can't see my ruler. This is where I do kind of measure. And then I'll go about 4.5 inches from that cut edge for the second pin. Let's go back up here. And then I'm just going to keep making these pleats like I usually do, which is I pinch, see now you're going to make me measure again. I pinch about 4 inches from that first fold and bring that down. And this mesh is nice because you can use the holes as your guide to make sure that you're getting sort of even pleats. And I'm not going to describe every pleating step because that will take forever. I'm just going to do it as fast as I usually do, which after 20,000 slings is pretty fast. If you've got a nice straight cut on the side, you can use that. Oh, I'm not in frame at all, am I? To kind of line things up. This particular mesh also has very light sort of lines going down it. You can use those to line up. So it's kind of a nice first project. If you were doing something like a gathered shoulder sling, you can use those lines as your guide for sewing the shoulder in. And again, if you're doing gathered, normally I recommend sewing fairly far from the rings. This material is going to scrunch up no matter how close you sew. So you could go as close as like sewing 2 to 3 inches from the rings. Just with small rings, the closer you get to the rings, the harder it's going to be. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. I'm going to have to get up and get my rings because I forgot to grab those. This is kind of a spur of the moment thing. Just be grateful I'm not doing it with a hot pink or you'll never be able to see another video. So this last one, you see I've got about 2 inches left. So I'm just making kind of a small pleat there to finish it off. And you know, this is the same as really as pleating any other sling. I've made the pleats a little bit smaller because I'm sewing the rings in closer to the edges. It means it's going to spread out more in this direction, so I can start with narrower pleats. So here, just as with my other pleating videos, I'm going to do a very long stitch, a basting stitch. I would recommend a ballpoint needle for this fabric. If you don't have one, just use a fairly small one. Reason being, if you use a thick, heavy needle, it's just not going to go through this stuff. And because I want a basting stitch, I'm going to lower the needle tension. That'll make it easier to take out once I've got the rings in. And I actually have a second one over there, so I'm just going to real quick run that through the machine. Whoops. I've got this actually on my light, so it's not ideal, but it does the job. That's why it's so wiggly once I'm sewing too, because it's attached to the light is attached to my sewing table. Yeah, you can hear even my machine is not terribly happy about going through this stuff. I don't have any ballpoint needles, so I'm just using the smallest gauge that I have, and it does not like that very much. All right, talk amongst yourselves while I get the rings. Sometimes my only exercise during the day is walking over and getting rings. Oh dear. Alright, I've got small aluminum rings from slingrings.com. And you can use either nylon or aluminum. It honestly does not make a difference. Aluminum won't rust. It's got a very low conductivity, so they really don't get that hot in the sun. You really shouldn't have your baby in direct sun anyway, so you know, keep that in mind. So I don't know if you saw there, I'm just threading them onto the fabric as I normally would. Remember to change my tension back. And I actually like to use, excuse me, a 3-step zigzag for this part. And I've got my zigzag set fairly wide and the stitches fairly short. So a 3-step zigzag, you'll see what that looks like. And as with any other sling like this, I'm going to use my basting stitches as a guide to line up the rest of my fabric. So you can see probably that the needle goes in and out 3 times for each zigzag that it does. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's what makes it a 3-step zigzag. That'll allow it to stretch across a little bit if you want it to. I think it also makes a fairly nice finish. And I am going right over the raw edge, the cut edge of this fabric. It's not going to fray, so we really don't need to worry about that at all. And yeah, I could have come a little bit further over that, but it's not super critical. And here I'm going to take out my basting stitch for a little tidier look on the front. So that's 1 row, and you really, because it's gone 3 times across, you could leave it at that. I prefer to do 2 rows just in case. So here I'm overlapping these pleats a little bit more at the rings. That makes the fabric take up less space in the rings, and it also lets it fan out more after the stitching. So that's why I do that. And I'll just do another row of that 3-step zigzag. I'm using the edge of my foot to sort of guide me along the first row that I did. Oop, yeah, see, machine's not happy with that. Even good thread breaks sometimes. I'll just go about 1/2 inch back from where I was. And you do want to back tack if your machine doesn't do that little automatic knot thing that mine does. Advantage of having a business like this means that I can splurge on a really good machine. So that's what it looks like with the 2 rows of stitching in. And then, you know, using it is going to be the same as any other sling. You know, find your edges. Let me zoom out a little bit here. Find your edges, sort of gather this up together, put it through both rings, and thread it back through just the bottom ring. And then with material like this, it's even more critical, I think, to make sure that you're spreading this out. Because the fabric is already so thin and so slippery, it is going to be prone to slipping in the rings. Even with small rings, you're going to have to adjust it more often. Less so in the water, but when it's dry, definitely. So when it's threaded correctly, you'll want this nice sort of gathered appearance. And you can see, even though I made those pleats pretty small, it still spreads out nicely above the rings. Do feel free to leave questions if you have any in the comments, and I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.